Welcome to Virtual Office Hours, Buying and Leasing Cars, sponsored by the American Bar Association and nonprofit Access Lex Institute. The Virtual Office Hours series connects you with experts to help you thrive as a law student and prepare for life after law school. We're really excited today to have Theresa Popp Braun with us to talk about the pros and cons of buying versus leasing a vehicle. Theresa has 20 plus years of experience in student financial aid, student services, financial education, and wellness programming. This experience, combined with her personal journey as a student loan borrower, shape the unique and caring perspective she brings to helping students better understand and manage their money, especially when they are financing and paying off their higher education costs. Theresa, we'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you so much, Tracy. It is such a pleasure to be here today with all of you, and especially to be talking about this topic because it's a really timely one, given what's going on in the automobile market out there, given the situation with the pandemic. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how it plays into buying and leasing a car in just a moment. Before we get started, though, I did want to tell you a little bit about the organization that I'm with, and that's the Access Lex Institute. We are a nonprofit organization, and we've been around almost 40 years now. We were founded in 1983. And at the core of our mission are two things. One, we really work hard to increase the accessibility, the affordability, and the value of a legal education. And we do that through policy advocacy and research both that we conduct as an organization and funds we provide to others to do research on those topics. And that takes place through our Center for Legal Education Excellence. The other thing at the core of our mission is to increase the financial capability of law students. And to that end, we have created the Max by Access Lex program. So if you are a currently enrolled law student joining us today, and you are attending a school that participates in our Max program, you have access to a free personal finance program that was designed specifically for law students. And that program is conducted out of our Center for Education and Financial Capability, and that's the center that I work out of. And before we begin, again, if you are in law school or you are a legal professional, you understand legal disclaimers. And for the purposes of our closed caption, I'll read it to you. The information provided in Max by Access Lex events and other Max resources is being made available to assist you in developing your personal financial strategy and is not intended as investment, tax, or legal advice. Should consider whether the information is appropriate for your needs and, where applicable, seek advice from an appropriate professional advisor. Little bit of context before we start talking about buying and leasing and the pros and cons. Because of the pandemic, we are in a very interesting situation with vehicles. We have seen this year, 2021, the highest average new car prices and used car prices. The average new car price is hovering around $40,000, which is about an 18% increase from the previous year. And used car prices are hovering around $23,000. Why is this? It's because there are a shortage of new cars because of the worldwide microchip shortage that has to do with the supply chain. So we have a shortage of used cars. People are holding on to their cars. The percentage of cars that are being leased is down because most of the time people lease new cars and there aren't as many new cars. Leasing is down. It had reached an all-time high of 31% last year. It's down to 26%, not because people aren't interested in leasing, but it's because in general, there is a shortage of cars. So when there's a shortage of something and everybody wants it, that a basic economic principle is that the price goes up. It's a supply-demand issue. So the reality is right now is not the greatest time to buy or lease a car. So if you can hold off and wait till the market stabilizes, that might be the best strategy for you. But if you absolutely can't and you're considering buying or leasing, then we will talk about that and determine what might be the best option for you. When we are thinking about a vehicle, what drives our decision, right? We might need transportation. 93% of all households in the United States have at least one vehicle. And in many areas of our country, having a vehicle at your disposal every day on a regular basis is a necessity. We think about this. This is one of the most common questions that personal finance coaches, financial planners get. Should I buy or lease my car? Because it's a huge monthly expense. When you look at the amount that it takes out of most people's monthly income, it's a big expense. There's an opportunity cost associated with it. There's an opportunity cost associated with every dollar we spend. But when we think about a vehicle, we think about, I can afford X amount of dollars, but maybe that's not what I should be spending, because for every dollar we don't spend on the car, we can use it to put toward other financial goals, which our financial goals are all different depending on where we are in our financial life cycle. And a vehicle, as mentioned a little bit ago, is a huge purchase. When you think about a car, a home, and education are the three largest expenses that most adults in the United States will spend money on during their entire lifetimes. So it's a big thing to think about. What I've tried to do is I've tried to distill it down into some really digestible pieces, because I was saying to Tracy, this could be an entire day workshop on buying and leasing. But I think it's important, if we want to think about it in terms of how much, how long, and how far, and if we can answer those questions, that will give us a better idea for each of us, for ourselves, whether or not which route we should go down. So, how much should I pay? I like to say, how much should I pay, rather than how much can I afford, because of that opportunity issue. We can look at our budget and we can say, well, I can afford $500 a month, but if you only spend $400 a month, you have an extra $100 a month or $1,200 a year that you can use for other things. So it's important to think about not only how much fits into your budget, but do you really want to spend that amount? And then most people usually only think about the payment amount. But when we own a vehicle, just like when we own a home, it's not just the payment. With a car, with a vehicle, it's maintenance costs, insurance, and if we don't have an electric vehicle, it's gasoline. So we need to think about the totality of what that vehicle is going to cost us. And there are some great websites out there, and Tracy's going to drop some links in the chat panel as I reference them. And there are a lot of links on how to figure out maintenance cost and how much it's going to cost me to keep my vehicle, insurance rates, those types of things. So you need to figure that out in terms of how much should you really be paying for the vehicle. You also need to do your own personal financial analysis, meaning a budget or a monthly spending plan. And regardless of, say you decide leasing's for me, and you go into a dealership or you go online, because there are some places online where you can inquire about leasing and you can get quotes across many different car dealerships or leasing companies that will let you borrow, have the car from them. Don't share the monthly payment amount that you're thinking about. Many times the salesperson will ask you that, and talk about the price and negotiate the price as if you are only going to purchase. One of the first things you'll get asked when you go into a showroom is, are you interested in leasing or buying? If you say lease, they're going to try to make the price, ultimately, the price of the vehicle, as high as they can. Because when you lease a car, what you're paying for is you're paying for the depreciation, which is the amount of the value that your car will decrease over the life of the lease. And so they want that car to have the highest price possible. So make them or let them assume that you are in there to purchase the car. And then when you have agreed upon a price, you can then say, well, I really think I want to lease this. It's very difficult for them to back down on the price after they have negotiated it with you as if you were going to purchase it. The second question is, how long do I plan to keep the vehicle? And these are generalities, but in general, the average lease period is 36 months or 3 years. If you are planning to keep your car for more than 3 years in general, then you might want to consider purchasing it. But if you are the type of person, oh, I went a little bit too far, excuse me. If you are the type of person who loves new technology, wants the latest designs, wants to customize features, they have different colors of cars that come out periodically, and you want that on a regular basis, then maybe leasing is for you. When you lease a car, obviously you pay for it. Then when you're done leasing it, because you're basically borrowing the car for the length of your lease. When it's done, you give it back to them. You can buy it at the end of your lease. And when you do a lease at the outset, there's something called residual value. They figure out before you ever take the car off the lot in a lease, what it will be worth when you bring it back. That's part of them figuring out the depreciation. So the residual value is what you would pay at the end of the lease if you want to buy the car. Say you get a 3-year lease and at the end you say, no, I really want to buy this car. You can still try to work on negotiating that. That is the amount that you would have to pay. So if you're the kind of person that just wants to turn the car in and get a brand new one, that's great. If you think that you're the type of person that would keep the car longer, then longer than 3 years, you might consider the purchase option. I am definitely that person. I did get a new car in 2018, but my previous one I bought in 2003. I am not a good candidate for a lease. I get my car, I get attached to it, I like it, I get rid of it after that period of time because it became uneconomical to maintain it anymore because of all the things that were going wrong with it. So think about how long you would like to keep a car. And we had a question come in. Someone said, how do I figure out about leasing given my lifestyle? And this is part of that. What are you attracted to and how often would you want a new car? Then there's third question, how far will I drive the vehicle? And here you want to analyze your driving habits and your needs. You want to look at potential hazards to your vehicle, because the advantage of owning your own vehicle is that you can maintain it or not. It might affect resale value if you don't maintain it, but you don't have to, because you are paying on it or you finished paying on it, and it's no skin off anybody's back except yours, perhaps, for a resale. You can customize it. You can drive it as many miles as you want. When you lease a car, there are annual mileage limitations, and it's usually somewhere between 10 and 15,000 miles per year. If you go over that amount, there will be a stipulation in your lease for every mile above what you're given in the lease, you will have to pay. And that usually averages about 15 to 20 cents. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it really adds up if you go far above what you have been allocated in the lease for your mileage. You can buy extra miles as part of your lease agreement at the outset, but think of it as if the gasoline that we buy prepay when we rent a car. If you prepay and you don't use all the gas, you don't get any money back. It's the same way with a car lease. If you buy extra miles and you don't use them, you don't get the money back. So a lot of people with the pandemic, a lot of people weren't driving because they didn't have to commute to work. And so that really helped on the mileage portion of the lease. The other thing is these potential hazards to your vehicle. So if it's just you driving the car and you don't have a family, or you don't have a significant other or a partner or a spouse that you might have to share the vehicle with, if you have a safe place to park your car, if so it isn't, it won't need to succumb to external hazards that might happen out there. Someone could scratch it, steal it. There might be weather hazards. When you lease a car, you are expected to bring it back in pretty much pristine condition. They have a clause that says normal wear and tear, but you have to make sure that you read the fine print as to what normal wear and tear involves. Because if you bring the car back and they analyze it, you may end up having to pay for different repairs or damage to the vehicle. Generally. So you look at your lifestyle, you look at the potential hazards that may be there. You know, do you live in the city, busy city? Do you live out in the country? And that can help to also focus on your decision on whether or not you should be leasing the car or buying the car, depending on how you would answer those questions. For those of you who are enrolled in a law school right now, we have an awesome new tool that we just launched last week called Ask Edna. And you can create a free account. All of our resources there are free at askedna.accesslex.org. And you can have the ability to go in and you can make a max coaching appointment with me, or with any one of our team members. And if you want to chat in more detail about your particular circumstance for your thoughts about buying or leasing a vehicle, these are 30-minute phone appointments. They are always free and they're unlimited. And everyone who would be talking to you, including myself, we are all accredited financial counselors. If you, and I went too fast again. If you are not an enrolled law student, you still have the ability to use this service. It's just in a different place, but it's called Access Connects. So you can go there, accesslex.org/accessconnects, and you can make an appointment to speak to someone. We got some really, really great questions that came in before the session began. So I'm going to go through those, and I think based on the questions and the responses I'm going to share with you, that you will, hopefully, you'll learn a little bit more about the buy lease option, and it'll give you a little more insight into how you can make that decision for yourself. So someone wrote and asked, is it okay for me to buy an expensive car? They want a fully loaded electric vehicle while having a lot of student debt. They're all really great questions. I'm going to address this one with a couple of additional questions. Can you afford it? And if you can, should you be paying that much for a vehicle? Some things to ask yourself. Something you need to consider when you have any debt is there's something called the debt to income ratio. And it is a ratio that lenders use to determine, in part, it's like an indicator of our financial health. So they look at how much income you have. Some of the formulas, depending on what you're buying, look at gross income, which is your income before taxes. Others look at your adjusted gross income. But when you have too much debt, you have a high debt to income ratio. That affects your ability to get financing, and it also may affect the rate that you get your financing. You also need to think about your credit score. Where is that in this? Because the lower our credit score, the more we are going to pay for everything that we have financed. And also, it's important to look at your other financial goals. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. So when we're thinking about buying an expensive car and having a large car payment, what is the opportunity cost that we are going to have to, that's going to happen when we are allocating so much of our monthly income to a car payment. Someone said, how do I select a used car? So we don't always buy a new car, we buy used cars. There are a lot of great sites to, a couple of them are looking at Kelley Blue Book, looking at Edmunds. You want to figure out the value of different cars. When you go to look at a car, it's great if you know something about cars. If you don't, maybe you have a friend or a family member who does, take them with you. Try to get a hold of the Carfax report, because that should tell you about maintenance and accidents. You can also ask the seller, whether it's a dealer or whether it's someone private that you might be looking at to buy the car from. If you can see maintenance records, if they won't give you maintenance records, then that may tell you something about the quality of the car. And you have to, we have to do our research on most purchases, but especially on big ones like a car. And you also have to be willing to walk away. If you're not going to get the deal that you want, and you don't feel that the car is worth what someone is asking, and this applies to whether it's a new or a used car, you need to be willing to walk away. Another great question that came in is, what should I do at the end of a lease? So obviously you can turn the car in and then you can get another lease if you still need a vehicle and a new car and just keep paying. You can you can buy. There is the provision clause to buy the lease or buy the car when you're done, or you can decide at that point that you are now going to, you want to purchase a car. So I talked earlier about me being the type of person that keeps their car forever, and I know people that are the exact opposite. They want a new car every 3 years, and they don't care that they're going to have a car payment on a lease, far into the future. They don't care about that. So a couple of strategy points though here is, don't tip your hand early in your lease and indicate that you might want to buy it at the end. What normally happens is about 90 days before your lease is due to expire, the leasing company will contact you about the fact that it's going to expire. When it gets close to the actual expiration date, then you can indicate that you might be interested in buying it. Because the longer you wait to express that interest, the more willing they're going to be to negotiate. Because a little known fact is that when we lease a car, we're not actually leasing it from the car dealership. We go there, we get a negotiated price, and then the dealership sells that car either to the bank or to many dealerships have a financing company arm or to an actual leasing company. And then we lease it from that entity. And so when we get done leasing a car and we give it back, it doesn't go back to the dealership. The leasing company has to sell it. And they would much rather sell it to us than have to figure out where they're going to sell it on the open marketplace, or if the dealer will take it back in some kind of transaction. So wait till your lease is almost ready to expire if you are interested in buying the vehicle. When you are done leasing it, take a look at that residual value that you will know from the beginning, and then compare that to what's out there in the marketplace now. This is another reason why there are a shortage of cars, is because people see that there's a shortage of vehicles in the marketplace. They have seen how the prices have increased. And so a lot of leases that have come up for expiration, people are just buying the vehicles so they can keep a car. They felt like it was a reasonable price, and they don't have to go back out into the open market where prices are so high. Okay, we have a question about, should I lease a car for business? And this depends. If you are self-employed, and this actually relates, there were a couple, let's see, it was Why buying or leasing autos is important to attorneys, and should I lease my car for business? So if you are a self-employed attorney, you own your own firm, maybe you're in a partnership, there are ways to deduct the business use of your vehicle. If you lease or buy a vehicle and you use it for business purposes and personal purposes, you can only deduct the portion of the use that is related to your business. The IRS, and Tracy will drop this in the chat panel, the IRS has a topic book on the business use of a car. But I strongly encourage anyone who is considering that to either talk to a trained tax preparer, a tax attorney, a tax accountant, to make sure that you understand what those rules are. Generally, with a leased car, what you do is the IRS publishes a standard mileage deduction every year. And so you would have to take that on a leased vehicle. On a vehicle that you own, there are a couple of different ways to deduct your expenses. But again, you can only deduct that portion of your expenses that are directly related to the business use of your car. So you're going to have to keep track of mileage. And Tracy's going to drop another link in the chat panel that there's some great apps out there that help you to keep track of that mileage, because you have to keep good records for the IRS. Okay, let me see if oh, here's one. Is it a better investment to lease during law school and purchase the leased vehicle afterwards, or just buy it new outright during law school? So I'll start again with a question. Do you need to have a car during law school? Where are you attending law school? Is it somewhere where you could get by with occasionally renting a vehicle when you need one, or taking public transportation, doing ride share, walking, biking, that kind of thing? If the answer is no, and you need a car, a couple of things to think about is generally lease payments are less than purchase payments. So that's a plus. When you lease a car, the monthly payment that you make every month, you will have to pay sales tax on that. When you buy a car, you pay sales tax on the whole amount. And something else to consider is when you are in law school, if you are borrowing student loans, you cannot get an increase in your what's called the cost of attendance to cover car payments. There will be a transportation allocation in your cost of attendance wherever you're attending. And what you do with that money is what you do with that allocation is up to you, but it is not enough to cover like large car payments. So again, think about whether you really need a car. If you do, leasing might be the better option, because generally the payments are less than when you purchase, and you don't have the big sales tax. And then you can always look at the lease when it expires, look at the residual value, and decide if it makes sense for you to buy that car at that time. And let's see. I think that those are all the questions that came in prior to. And again, thank you for all of those that you submitted prior to the session today. And I'll ask Tracy if anything else has come into the Q&A or the chat panel that I can address now.
Sure. You talked a little bit about credit score.
Yes.
There's a question. The question is, how does the credit score affect your leasing cost?
So what happens with, every time we want to have any kind of financing or borrowing, the potential creditor, and in this case, the leasing company, the financing company, they want to take a look at, how likely is it that we are going to make our payments? So in the case of a car lease, they want to look at your credit score, and the lower your credit score, that tells them that the probability is lower that you will actually follow through on this lease and you will make your payments as scheduled. And so that can have a bearing on the interest that you are charged. So when you do a lease, they figure out the value of the car, they figure out how long you're going to have the lease. And then, so that can help them figure out the depreciation. But your payment is not just based on that depreciation. Say you get a 3-year lease and they divide that into 36 months and say, okay, this car is going to depreciate X amount over the next 36 months. And so this is what it will be per month. They have to charge you to use that, to use the, I guess, their financing. And so the lower your credit score, the higher the financing charge. And there's a lot of really confusing language in car leases. There is a great website, and Tracy will drop that link in the chat panel, and it's understanding the terms that are in a car lease, because they don't call it interest, they call it the money factor. And when you see it, it's this really, really tiny, tiny decimal, but you have to multiply it by 2,400 to actually get the interest rate. But if you have a very good or excellent credit score, you're going to pay less in what is the equivalent of interest. If you buy a car, again, it's called a money factor, you're going to pay less than you will pay if your credit score is lower. Hopefully that answered that question. Anything else?
I believe that's the only question that we needed to answer. So I did drop the resource links in the chat, but we're also going to make those available when we send out the email to the registrants, and also posting it online so you can reference those at any time. And then we're also going to include Teresa's slides in there. But we do want to thank everyone for joining us today, and a special thank you to Theresa Popp Braun and the Access Lex Institute. We hope you'll join us for more upcoming virtual office hours programming. So visit our website, abaforlawstudents.com, for the full lineup. Thanks again.
Thank you.